My step-parents told every person they introduced me to at my brother's wedding that I cleaned houses for a living. Not once, not as a slip, not in the careless way that people sometimes describe someone's work imprecisely because they have not paid close enough attention to understand it correctly. Deliberately. Consistently. With the particular satisfaction of people who have found a version of the truth that serves a specific purpose and have decided to use it at every available opportunity across a 4-hour wedding reception in front of 200 people. I do own a cleaning company. That part is accurate. What is not accurate, and what my step-parents understood was not accurate because I had explained it to them twice in the previous year, is that owning a cleaning company and cleaning houses are two different things in the same way that owning a restaurant and washing dishes are two different things. I had not held a cleaning cloth professionally in 4 years. I had 41 employees across 3 cities, contracts with 14 commercial clients including 2 hotel groups and a hospital network, and a revenue figure that I was not in the habit of sharing at social gatherings but that would have reorganized several of the conversations happening at that reception if I had chosen to share it. I had not chosen to share it. I had been introduced as the girl who cleans houses and I had smiled and shaken hands and moved through the reception with the particular patience of someone who has learned that correcting certain people in certain rooms produces outcomes that serve nobody well, and who has also learned that patience is not the same as acceptance and that the difference between the two is what you decide to do after the room has emptied. The guest who froze was not someone I had planned for. My name is Natasha. I am 31 years old. This is the story of my brother's wedding and the guest who froze when my step-parents introduced me as the girl who cleans houses, and what that guest said, and what the rest of the evening looked like after he said it. But before the guest I need to tell you about my step-parents and about the particular history that made their decision to describe me that way at a wedding feel, to them, like something they were entitled to do. The history. My father remarried when I was 17. My stepmother Sandra and my stepfather, who I will call Richard because that is his name and I see no reason to protect him with anonymity he did not extend to me, had been together for 2 years before my father introduced them to me and had developed, across those 2 years, a settled and comfortable view of who I was and what I was likely to become. The view was not flattering. I was 17 and quiet and more interested in the logistics of running the small errand business I had started at 15 than in the social performances that Richard and Sandra valued in young people, which were confidence and charm and the particular kind of gregarious ease that reads well at dinner tables and produces the impression of potential in people who judge potential by its presentation rather than its substance. I did not present well at dinner tables. I presented well in spreadsheets and client conversations and the specific problem-solving that running a small business requires of a 17-year-old who has no margin for error because every dollar is her own. Richard and Sandra did not see spreadsheets. They saw a quiet girl who did not shine at dinner and had drawn conclusions accordingly. Those conclusions had solidified across 14 years into a settled certainty that I was, as Sandra had described me to a relative at a previous family gathering that a cousin had reported back to me, not really the ambitious type. I had been running a company with 41 employees for 3 years when she said that. I had not corrected it when the cousin told me because correcting it would have required a conversation with Sandra about my actual professional circumstances and I had made a decision some years earlier that my professional circumstances were not Sandra's business and were certainly not something I was interested in using to impress her, because impressing Sandra had never been a goal I had organized my life around and I was not going to start at 31. What I had not anticipated was that Sandra would take my silence about my professional circumstances as confirmation of her conclusion and would begin, at my brother's wedding, to share the conclusion with 200 people as though it were established fact. The wedding. My brother James got married on a Saturday in October to a woman named Claire who I liked immediately and completely, in the specific way you like people who are direct and warm in equal measure and who make the person you love seem more fully themselves rather than less. The wedding was beautiful. Claire had planned it with the thoroughness of someone who cares about details and the lightness of someone who understands that details are in service of the day rather than the point of it, and the result was an afternoon that felt both considered and genuinely joyful, which is a combination that is harder to achieve than it sounds. I arrived alone. I was seated at a table with cousins I liked and a family friend I had known since childhood, and the ceremony was everything a ceremony should be. And for the first hour of the reception I moved through the afternoon with the simple pleasure of someone watching 2 people they care about be happy in public. Then Sandra found me near the bar. She was with Richard and two couples I did not recognize, friends of Richard's from his professional life, the kind of people who arrive at weddings in expensive clothes and spend the first hour establishing through conversation where everyone ranks relative to everyone else. Sandra introduced me the way she introduced me to everyone that afternoon, with a particular smile and the specific phrasing she had apparently settled on as the version she was going to use. She said, "This is James's sister Natasha. She runs a little cleaning business." One of the men extended his hand. His wife smiled with the specific quality of warmth that people produce when they are being polite to someone they have immediately categorized. The other couple nodded in the way of people whose attention is already moving toward the next more interesting thing. I shook the man's hand. I smiled. I said it was nice to meet them. Sandra moved the conversation forward with the ease of someone who has gotten what she wanted from an introduction and is ready to proceed to the next one, and I stood in that circle for 4 more minutes talking about the wedding and the venue and nothing that mattered, and then excused myself and went to find my seat. This happened 6 more times across the following 2 hours. 6 more introductions. 6 more versions of the same phrasing. Runs a little cleaning business, delivered with the same smile, to 6 different groups of people who received it with varying degrees of the same polite downward adjustment of expectation. I said nothing. I smiled. I moved through the reception with the patience I had promised myself I was going to maintain because it was my brother's wedding and the day was about James and Claire and not about the particular project Sandra had apparently decided to undertake with my professional reputation. The 7th introduction was different. Sandra found me near the entrance to the garden, where I had stepped out for a moment of quiet, with a man I did not recognize who had the quality of someone who has arrived late to a gathering and is being efficiently introduced to the relevant people. He was perhaps 60, well-dressed without effort, with the specific ease of someone who is entirely comfortable in any room they walk into because they have stopped needing the room to confirm anything about them. Sandra said, "This is Natasha, James's sister. She runs a little cleaning business." The man looked at me. And then something happened that I had not seen happen once across the previous 6 introductions. He froze. Not for long. 2 seconds, perhaps 3. But the freeze was complete and visible and entirely involuntary, the specific physical response of a person who has received information that does not match something they already know and whose body has registered the mismatch before their mind has decided how to address it. Then he said, "I am sorry, did you say cleaning business?" Sandra said, "Yes, she cleans houses." The man looked at Sandra. Then he looked at me. Then he said something that reorganized every conversation that had happened in that reception in the previous 2 hours. He said, "Natasha, I believe we have met before. You presented the proposal for the Henderson Hotel Group contract 18 months ago. If I am not mistaken, your company currently holds service contracts with 3 of our properties." The circle went very quiet. Sandra's smile did not disappear exactly. It rearranged itself into something that was no longer quite a smile and was not yet anything else, suspended in the particular moment between one expression and the next when the face has not yet decided what it is going to do. I looked at the man. I said, "Mr. Patterson." "Yes. It is good to see you." Mr. Patterson was the regional director of operations for the Henderson Hotel Group. I want to give you that context before I tell you what happened next because the context matters in the specific way that professional context always matters when it arrives unexpectedly in a personal setting and reorganizes the understanding of everyone present. He was not a minor figure in a small company. The Henderson Hotel Group operated 14 properties across 3 regions and Mr. Patterson was the person responsible for the operational standards of all of them, which meant he was the person whose signature was on the contract that currently represented the largest single account in my company's portfolio. He had been at the wedding because his wife was a childhood friend of Claire's mother. He had arrived late because of a flight delay from a conference in another city. He had been brought to the garden entrance by Claire's mother specifically because she wanted to make sure he had met the immediate family before the evening ended. Sandra had not known any of this when she introduced me as the girl who cleans houses. She knew all of it approximately 90 seconds after she said it. Mr. Patterson turned to Sandra with the particular courtesy of a man who has decided to handle a situation gracefully and has the social skill to do it without making the graciousness feel like condescension, which is a difficult combination to manage and which he managed without apparent effort. He said, "I have had the pleasure of working with Natasha's company for 18 months. She presented the initial proposal herself and it was one of the most thorough proposals we received that year. Her team currently manages 3 of our properties and we have been in preliminary discussions about extending the contract to 2 more." He said it to Sandra directly, conversationally, in the tone of someone sharing relevant professional information rather than correcting a mischaracterization, which was the more devastating version of the 2 options available to him because it left Sandra nowhere to go that was not visible to everyone in the circle. Richard said something. I do not remember exactly what because I was not paying close attention to Richard in that moment. It had the quality of a man trying to introduce a different note into a conversation that has moved past the point where a different note is useful. Sandra said, "Well, of course I did not mean to suggest." She did not finish the sentence. There was nothing available to finish it with that would have improved her position and she was skilled enough socially to understand this even in the specific discomfort of the moment she was currently inside. Mr. Patterson looked at me. He said, "I hope you are enjoying the evening. James seems like a wonderful person." "Claire certainly is." I said, "He is. And she is. I am very glad he found her." Mr. Patterson said he was going to find his wife and that it had been a pleasure as always. He shook my hand. He nodded to Sandra and Richard with the courteous neutrality of a man who has said what needed saying and considers the matter complete. He walked back toward the main reception hall. The circle was quiet for a moment. Then one of Richard's professional friends, the man who had shaken my hand at the first introduction 2 hours earlier, said, 3 hotel properties. That is significant. I said, "It is a good contract. We are proud of the work." His wife, who had smiled with the specific polite warmth of someone who had immediately categorized me downward 2 hours ago, looked at me with an expression that was doing something more complicated than it had been doing before. I excused myself. I went back inside. The reception. The remainder of the evening was different from the first 2 hours. Not dramatically different, not in the way that would have made the shift visible to anyone who had not been present for what happened in the garden. But different in the specific way that things are different when information has moved through a room and has reorganized the understanding of the people in it, which happens at social gatherings with the particular efficiency of a network that is already connected and already talking. I did not introduce myself to anyone for the rest of the evening. I did not need to. 3 separate people introduced themselves to me, including Richard's professional friend who had shaken my hand at the first introduction and who now wanted to talk about the commercial cleaning industry and the hotel sector specifically and whether my company was looking at expanding into the conference venue market. I talked to him for 11 minutes. I gave him my card because he asked for it. I said I would be happy to have a conversation at a more appropriate time. Sandra did not introduce me to anyone after the garden. She and Richard moved through the remainder of the reception at a slight distance from me that was not quite avoidance and was not quite proximity and that I recognized as the particular spatial arrangement of people who are recalibrating and have not yet decided on their new position. I danced at the reception because James asked me to and because James is my brother and I was not going to let the events of the evening reach the dancing portion of the night as anything other than someone who was happy to be there celebrating him. We danced for 2 songs and he leaned in during the second one and said he had heard about the garden. I said, "From who?" He said, "Claire's mother told Claire and Claire told me approximately 4 minutes after it happened." I said, "It was not a big moment. Mr. Patterson was simply being accurate." James said, "Sandra has been telling people you clean houses since you arrived." I said, "I know." He said, "Why did you not say anything?" I said, "Because it is your wedding and the day is about you and Claire and I was not going to make your wedding about whether Sandra describes my company accurately to people she is trying to impress." He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "You are a better person than I am." I said, "I am a different person than you are. I do not think better is the right word." We finished the dance. He hugged me and went back to Claire, and I went back to my table and ate the dessert that had been placed there while I was dancing, which was excellent, and drank the last of my wine and watched my brother and his wife move through the final hour of their wedding with the particular joy of two people who have done the thing they wanted to do and are now simply inside it. The after. Sandra called me the following Tuesday. Not to address the garden directly, not with the kind of explicit acknowledgement that would have required her to name what had happened and her role in it. Sandra did not operate that way, and I had not expected her to. She called with the particular framing of someone who wants to move past something without going through it, the conversational equivalent of walking around a difficult piece of furniture rather than addressing why it is in the middle of the room. She said it had been a beautiful wedding. She said Claire seemed lovely. She said she hoped I had enjoyed myself. I said I had enjoyed myself very much. She said, I hope I did not give the wrong impression to anyone about your work. I sometimes do not explain things as clearly as I should. I sat with that for a moment. It was the closest Sandra was going to come to an acknowledgement, and I had known before she called that it was the closest she was going to come, and I had decided before she called what I was going to do with it. I said, Sandra, I appreciate you saying that. I want to say something to you directly, and I want to say it once, and then I would like us to move forward without needing to return to it. She said, of course. I said, I have been running a company for 7 years. It currently employs 41 people across 3 cities and holds contracts with 14 commercial clients. I did not tell you this because I did not feel I needed your approval to do what I was doing, and I still do not feel that I need it. What I would ask is that going forward you either describe my work accurately or you do not describe it at all, because the version you have been using does not serve the people you are introducing me to, it does not serve me, and based on Saturday evening it does not particularly serve you either. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that is fair. I said, I think so too. We talked for 4 more minutes about nothing significant, and then we said goodbye, and I put the phone down and went back to the quarterly report I had been working on when she called, which was showing the strongest numbers the company had produced in its 7-year history. I finished the report. I sent it to my operations manager. I made tea and sat at my desk and thought about a man in a garden at a wedding saying, I believe we have met before, with the particular tone of someone who is about to say something that is going to matter. I thought about Sandra's smile rearranging itself in the space between one expression and the next. I thought about 41 employees across 3 cities and 14 commercial clients and the Henderson Hotel Group and the preliminary discussions about 2 more properties, and all of it built without Sandra's knowledge or approval or the version of me she had been describing to people at dinner tables for 14 years. I thought about what it meant to build something so completely that the moment someone who knew its actual dimensions walked into the same room as the person describing it incorrectly, the correction happened without you having to say a single word. That was the part one had not planned. Mr. Patterson arriving late from a flight delay from a conference in another city and being brought to the garden entrance by Claire's mother and finding me being introduced as the girl who cleans houses. Some things you cannot plan. You can only build well enough that when they happen the building speaks for itself. My company speaks for itself now. It has for a while. I had simply been the only one in most of the rooms where it was speaking. Saturday changed that. Not dramatically, not permanently, not in every room. But in one garden at one wedding with one circle of people and one man who had the contract on 3 of my hotels in his portfolio. That was enough. That was more than enough. If someone described you as less than you are in a room that turned out to contain someone who knew exactly what you were, leave a comment. Tell me where you are watching from. Subscribe for the next one. This is Hidden Truth Revenge, where the truth always finds a way.